It's obviously different talking to monks and talking to lay people. I've always experienced for myself that there's, in a sense, two kinds of teachers. One teacher would teach regardless of who is sitting in front of him. And Ajahn Chah was a bit like that. Some of the best talks of Luang Por Chah were actually given to lay people, interestingly enough. However, other monks, they would make a very clear distinction when they talk to lay people. Their talks would be different. It would be different flavor, different color, a different approach. And then they talk to monks and it would be completely different. So I remember when I was in Perth with Ajahn Brahmavamsa, we prohibited the lay people from coming to the Wednesday evening talks in the monastery because they were supposed to be for the monks. But very quickly the lay people then found out that the talks to the monks were actually much better. So they traveled 60 kilometers to the monastery to listen to the monks' talks. But then we had to actually forbid it because sometimes we had more lay people than monks. And of course then the quality of the talk would then veer in the other direction. So anyway, one of the things that I find in the world, and you're living in the world, you're not living in a monastery. Of course the topic is equally relevant and important for monks as well. But that's the foundation of harmony for our practice. So whether you live in any community, whether it's a lay community, whether it's a marriage, a family or monastic community, or in the world at large, if there is no harmony, if there is division, if there's tension, if there's all that, then there's no peace. And there's no foundation for really practicing because people are always thinking in these divisive terms. You know, we are like that and they are like that. We are like that and they are like that. And so when we come to understand the Dhamma more and more, we recognize the fact that as human beings, we're actually all in the same boat. We're all sitting in the same boat. We're all born into this world, thrown into this world, and then we have to somehow make it through, and then we get old, and we get sick, and we die. So whether you're a monk or a lay person, that we have in common. However, in the meantime, we have to be able to live with one another. We have to be able to live with each other. And to do that, the Buddha was very clear that that's the purpose of keeping sila. And that's the purpose of living in a way where we don't intentionally harm ourselves or others. And so, for lay people, it's a lot more on the level of speech. Right speech is so important to put a lot of effort in. For the monks, hopefully they don't talk so much in the monastery. So for them it's more their thoughts that they have to rein in and look after and preserve harmony in their minds. But for lay people, they talk a lot. You know, wherever you go, you hear them talking. And somebody once said is that the reason people talk so much is because they don't actually have anything to say. They just keep talking, and sometimes you wonder, what are they talking about? You know, why are they even talking? You know, because it's just air. You know, just air passing through their lips. And I mean, I'm not saying that monks always talk only about Dhamma or talk only properly. But because of the amount of speech that we engage in as lay practitioners, that's where we really have to put a lot of effort to make sure that our speech is considerable. For the 5 precepts, obviously, it's just lying. But then there's this other teaching where the Buddha sort of breaks it up a little bit more into detail, and he says that there's certain forms of speech, and as always I can never remember which one is the first, but I'll just say them as I remember them. One of the things he says, you shouldn't use harsh speech. And I really had a problem with that, because when I left Germany I was 22 years old, and I was talking like a teenager, you know, using swear words and, you know, quite sort of, we had our own kind of language. It was almost like code. So then I hadn't lived in Germany for 20 years, spoken English most of the time and Thai, and then they put me back to Germany in charge of a monastery, and I'm supposed to be this pious speaker who doesn't use any bad words. And of course it didn't work, because my German language reverted straight back to when I was 22. So I had to make a real effort to not upset too many of these pious Buddhists, because people always have the idea a monk is supposed to speak like this and he's not supposed to speak like this. So anyway, I had to really make an effort not to use harsh language. Yeah? And because nobody likes harsh words, do they? I mean, everybody likes soft words, sweet words, words of praise, words that go down, like the Buddha said, like milk and honey, you know? So everybody likes that. So we should make an effort, because we know that it hurts us, it doesn't feel right when people talk harshly to us. Yeah? We should always reflect like that. So why would we use that kind of language when we talk to other people? Yeah? So making an effort about harsh speech. And then I think the other ones in there anyway is malicious tale-bearing, they call it sometimes, or they call it backbiting. It's basically repeating somewhere else what you've heard in one place, yeah, with the intention of creating division. Yeah? Or repeating what you heard elsewhere over here with the intention of creating division. Yeah? And sometimes, because our sati, our mindfulness, is not very strong, we don't even know that deep down that is our intention. Because most people who haven't practiced meditation and looked into their mind, they're not even aware of their intentions. They just open their mouth and it just comes out. Yeah? So be very wary of the intention of causing division. Because there's so much division in the world, there's these fronts building up, you know, we are right, you are wrong, and everybody else is wrong, and we're the only ones who are right, and you got it all wrong. So remember, in warfare, and as Chinese, I'm sure you've read your fair share of Chinese warfare, which is very famous, of course. The best way was always divide and conquer. If you could divide people, that's the way to conquer. And I remember reading this in, I think, maybe it's the Samanyapala Sutta, I can't remember exactly, or it's one of these longer suttas, I think. And as Ajatasattu, remember, you know, you all know your Buddhism, you know your scriptures a little bit. Ajatasattu, he was a son of Bimbisara, I think, and he had killed his father, put him in prison. But his father was so cool, he was just sitting in his cell and he's looking out the window, he could see the vulture's peak, and it just gave him so much pity. So he thought he would be dying in this prison, but of course he lasted a long time, for those who know the story. Anyway, Ajatasattu, this is after his dad passed away, he was the king, and he wanted to flatten the Vajjayans, which is another clan. So he wanted to basically make them like they never existed, wanted to erase them from the surface of the earth. So he goes to the Buddha and he says, look, I want to erase the Vajjayans, I want to get rid of them, I want to just kill them all and take over the country. You got any tips for me? And it's amazing, these things, you know, what people take to the Buddha. So the Buddha then turns, I think, to Ananda, Venerable Ananda, and he says, Ananda, you remember the Vajjayans, they're keeping these, can't remember how many it was, 6 or 7 rules of harmony? And Ananda says, yeah, they're still keeping to this, keeping to that, yeah, they're keeping all of them still. And so the Buddha turns over to Ajatasattu and says, sorry, mate, can't do it. They're too strong. They're still really adhering to all these good practices, and there's no way you can just erase them. So then Ajatasattu turns to his chief general, I think it was, and he says, well, in that case, you know what we do? We just destroy them through intrigue. We set Vajjayans against Vajjayans within their country, and that way we're going to conquer them. So this is like 2,500 years ago, and it's what's happening to this day. So divisiveness is really a cause of dissension and really a cause of suffering in the world, and we can see that. And so we should really strive as good Buddhists, keeping sila, paying attention to our speech, that we don't create divisiveness through the way we talk. We should be able to keep a secret. If somebody tells us something in confidence, or we should be able to refrain from this desire of being someone who knows something special, Hey, have you heard? Have you heard? So it's not necessary. And it also doesn't make us peaceful, And then, of course, there's lying, flat out lying. I think breaking promises falls into that category as well. So if you make a promise, you should really strive to keep it, not just easily break a promise. If you make a promise to someone, then you should really make an effort to keep that promise. Otherwise, it's tantamount to lying. And the last one, I think, is this stupid talk, chit-chat. Actually, the funny thing is that the Pali word for that is sampapalapa. And that already sounds like stupid talk, doesn't it? Sampapalapa. Because it's either blah blah or, in German they have a similar word for that which sounds exactly like it. So when you hear it, you know already it's useless talk. Yeah, it's useless talk. And then the interesting thing in terms of law in countries, you can actually go to jail for lying under certain circumstances. Yeah? You can go to jail for malicious tale-bearing. Yeah? There are cases where that would be a cause of a breach of the law. And I don't know about harsh speech. If you insult the king of Thailand, definitely go to jail. So you may have other countries. These kind of rules, they vary from country to country. Yeah? But, and this is the kicker, you can't be put to jail for useless talk. And that's a real shame. I think people should go to jail for opening their mouth without having anything really to say. So, how much time do we waste in useless talk? Sometimes it's a good reflection. And with practicing, it's like one of the things I always found useful, even though admittedly I don't do it every day either, but I always recommend it to other people in case they like to try. When you go to bed at night or in the evening, and this comes from Venerable Jnana Vimala. He was a German monk in Sri Lanka, a very esteemed, wonderful monk, and I had the great fortune of meeting him. And he said, when you go to sleep at night, you should always allow the day to pass by you again, to recapitulate the day. Yeah? And seriously ask yourself, is there anything that I could have done better today? Is there anything that I could have done to improve my practice? Have I practiced to the best of my ability? And then if you can answer that with yes, then you have a very good basis for falling asleep peacefully. Perhaps spread some loving kindness before you go to sleep, or focus on your meditation object, because that's always a good way to go to sleep. If you just crash out, sometimes you dream stupid dreams, or you need more sleep. So even going to sleep mindfully and allowing the day to pass you by and kind of recapitulate is probably the best alternative there. And that's the way you make progress, because we have to constantly be undermining this idea that we've already achieved something. It's like, if we just allow ourselves to be content and not see that there are still areas of progress where we can make progress, then it's very difficult to progress. We need to not give in to the illusion of knowing. A lot of people, they give in to the illusion of knowing something. I know this about the Dhamma, I know that about the Dhamma. But it's always good to undermine that and say, no, I'm stupid. I don't know anything. I'm completely stupid. Because that way you have the opportunity to allow new things to influence you, and you can really learn a lot. But those people who really surrender to the illusion of knowing something, because if we know something, it's like you look at this and you say, oh, it's a glass. You put it down. But is it really a glass? How do you know? Who told you that this is a glass? So you look again, Because we have these names for everything in the world. We name it, and just by naming it, we give in to the illusion of knowing what it is. And that's why we never look deeper. And that's what meditation is get rid of all your assumptions, your learned knowledge, all your conventions, all your beliefs, until the mind goes empty. And if you then look at something, you can actually see anew, you see fresh. And then you may actually get some insight into what this thing really is. So anyway, those are just a few words of reflection, food for thought, hopefully, and encouragement. So, sadhu, anumodana.